Law school is not that different from any other educational institution. Teachers and instructors are there to guide you through a curriculum, where you weave together analytical skills and knowledge and hopefully develop a deeper understanding of a given subject. And just like other institutions, professors and instructors at law school aren't there to talk about the real world or the legal problem of the day, at least most of the time. Sometimes there's an event so confounding it seeps through the cracks of the lecture hall and there just needs to be a brief conversation about it. Recently, this was Premier Doug Ford's invocation of Section 33 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, or colloquially known as the Notwithstanding Clause. On July 30th of this year, there was the first reading of Bill 5, the Better Local Government Act, which made amendments to multiple pieces of legislation, but there was one amendment that caught the eye of many Torontonians. Bill 5 called to divide municipal wards in the same identical manner as provincial electoral districts. In effect, it was going to halve the amount of Toronto City Councillors. Lawyers of the City of Toronto protested Premier Ford's legislation amid public outcry. On September 10th, the Ontario Superior Court cut down the new law as unconstitutional because it substantially interfered with both the candidates and the voters' right to freedom of expression as guaranteed under Section 2B of the Canadian Charter. This was the trigger for the now infamous phrase.
Our first order of business will be to reintroduce the Better Local Government Act and with it invoke Section 33 of the Constitution.
So before we go any further, I want to give our listeners a small disclaimer. We are here to have a conversation, not provide legal advice. And we're not always going to be correct, and sometimes there will never be a right answer to the questions we're asking. But that's not going to stop us. So hi everyone, my name is Jonathan, and alongside my co-hosts Cerise and Jacob, we would like to welcome you to the Inter-Veners.
For what we're celebrating today is not so much the completion of our task, but the renewal of our hope. Not so much an ending, but a fresh beginning. Let us celebrate the renewal and patriation of our Constitution. But let us put our faith first and foremost in the people of Canada, who will breathe life into it.
What is very concerning moving forward is if our decisions in changing the laws to make this province better, make it more efficient, to build transit, to build infrastructure, to build housing, is being shot down by the courts, that's scary. That's disturbing.
Hey everyone, you're tuned into the Inter-Veners. Sit back, relax, and let us stimulate your mind.
July 30th, 2018, the first reading of Bill 5 hits the legislature.
You gotta sound a little more excited.
She's recording too, that's what...
You have to sound
No, because at this point it's old news, but it's still a totally relevant topic and something that no one was talking about in law school.
So it's like the
I had
Kavanaugh...
professors literally say, oh, I'm sure you guys know all about this, ha 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 ha, and move on, in admin. Like, what better class would it have been to have the conversation?
It's probably one of the best classes to have the kind of conversation in.
Right? So I'm allowed to be annoyed.
What is our conversation about, Yax?
The Notwithstanding Clause and its threatened use by Premier Doug Ford of the Ontario legislature in response to the trial court's decision in blocking his piece of legislation, which would have cut Toronto's city council by roughly half.
I mean, in his words, all the legislation was doing was making sure that the city wards of Toronto matched, bunny quotes, the provincial electoral districts. But yes, that effectively cut it in half.
Yes.
From 45 to 27.
And the reasoning that he has given is an efficiency argument. His reasoning is that if you cut down the city council, you will bypass the very thorough checks and balances process that stalls the passing of decisions at the city council level, the municipal level, because of how many city councillors there are.
But he proposes that the City of Toronto has been in gridlock. So he was doing the City of Toronto a favor in order to ensure
I think we're coming to this very skeptical.
No, he was saying
But
that
then he also said, let me tell you something. I was elected.
he was elected.
Yes, he was.
He introduced Bill 5.
Yeah, Bill 5.
Bill 5.
Bill
And
Gates.
in late July, passed the reading, about to sign it into law, and then suddenly the City of Toronto gets up in arms.
Yeah, the municipality was like, wait. You can't do that.
And I think that's one of the hearts. You can't really have one of the hearts, but I think that's one of the core issues here is the timing. This is during a campaign process, during an election time period, and he is directly using the word interfering might be a little harsh, even though that's pretty much what it is, but he's definitely impacting the electoral process here.
No, 100% is, because there were like Ward 1 and Ward 2 candidates who are now
In Ward 4.
Yeah, or like
Yeah.
now they're suddenly if you're in Ward 1, like one ward could have been 2 pre-existing wards, so now you've doubled the people that you're up against, and you've also have to now start campaigning.
And the
in
campaign
areas.
has been on for months. So you've only been campaigning in your pre-existing ward, and suddenly it's tripled in size.
And this is relevant, I guess, because the election is on October 22nd, which is
Next
In
week.
Next week.
Next week. There's a lot of places where we can take this discussion, but if I may,
Where are you going to take it?
I'm curious as to basically I don't think we've mentioned yet. So then the Ontario Court of Appeal came out and said basically that they are staying the lower court's decision and they are allowing.
staying means that they're basically overriding the.
Yeah.
They're canceling out the Ontario.
Cancelled. The lower court is cancelled, and Premier Doug Ford is allowed to continue with his bill.
Right, and that came out on September 19th, which is about a week after Premier Ford announced that he was going to go to the appeal court, and also on the same press conference say that his government was prepared to invoke the Notwithstanding Clause.
Yeah, and the Court of Appeal cited the idea that unfairness alone, and they recognize that it was unfair to maybe change an election 10 months after announcing it, or however long it's been, but unfairness alone does not establish a charter breach.
And so there's, again, a lot of places where we can take this. One of the biggest kind of outcries that I've seen in the media from, kind of legal people offering their opinions on things is why are municipal elections not protected by Section 3 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the democratic rights provision. The
Right.
Section 3 holds that, let's pull up Section 3. You guys keep talking.
Well, Section 3 is about how you have a right to vote. You have a right to democratic participation, but it's only in the legislative assemblies and the House of Commons. And the municipal city councils aren't covered by Section 3, which came out in a Supreme Court decision in 1993. It was Hague.
Yeah.
And the Court of Appeal cited this
Yeah.
because the Superior Court struck down Ford's legislation citing Section 3.
Yeah.
Into which the Ontario Court of Appeal said, like, no, this is not an appropriate application of Section 3 analysis.
And that is when people in the cities and Canada's urban centres learned, well, especially in Ontario, that municipalities and cities are purely constructed because the province says so. And because of that, the province has a lot of power to change, laws that affect a municipality, whenever they want.
So Premier Ford did nothing wrong. So he was standing by his guns.
He was standing by the majority's guns.
But
Yeah.
shouldn't
Those who
things
elected
change?
him.
Shouldn't our interpretation of Canada's laws, and in this case the Constitution, change? I mean, we learn in law school all of the time that we have kind of this living tree doctrine of interpretation. And a lot of other charter rights, for example, Charter Section 15, the equality rights provisions, a lot of new grounds, analogous grounds for equality rights
Right.
have been read in over the years.
Yeah, such as like age and marital status and stuff.
Exactly. So why shouldn't municipal elections be read into Section 3?
So you think that they should?
Well, no, I don't have the numbers in
Because of
front of me,
federalism.
but one of the things that you had mentioned in a off-the-record discussion was that the Toronto City Council, the Toronto electoral district, is larger than the district of one of the provincial electors. He's just, there's more people.
Well, there's more people in the city of Toronto than there are in like the Maritimes.
Exactly. So why shouldn't the municipal elections have as much protection as the election for provincial? And
Well, doesn't that take away power of the provinces then?
so it's an
Can't
argument
do
of
that.
federalism then. So
I said that 2 minutes ago.
no, that's
Yeah. So, but do you
we just had to work. We had to work back there.
So do you think that I personally think that this is going to become problematic for Canadians because we're becoming more and more urbanized. The population of urban centers are only going to increase, and even now, when people think of Canada, like they think of a collection of like 3, maybe 4 cities:
And
Montreal,
Vancouver, and Vancouver.
Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto, and like maybe Ottawa is the 4th.
As being the only person from Toronto in the room, I literally just got hives. I'm sorry, what?
Just got hives.
The center of the world is Toronto. Let's not forget.
See, I knew that was coming. That's why I had to get my 2 cents in there first.
So, Premier Ford did nothing wrong by invoking the Notwithstanding Clause, by introducing this legislation.
Well, I guess now we've kind of skirted around the entire constitutional crisis because the Court of Appeal has just stayed the decision of the lower court, and Premier Doug Ford doesn't even have to invoke the Notwithstanding Clause.
But John, you brought up this whole conversation because a prof in your advanced criminal law class asked the class a question. And what did he say?
He said that even if you this was at the time where the Ontario Court of Appeal had not announced its decision. So this was in mid-September. And at the time, everybody was up in arms about how he was invoking the Notwithstanding Clause. Yeah.
Or was going to.
He was prepared to invoke the Notwithstanding Clause. Because, I guess for our listeners, there's like a technical thing about a premier saying that they're going to invoke the Notwithstanding Clause, and then the actual order
of doing it.
Because there's actually been a lot of times in Canadian history where politicians say they're going to do it, but not as many times where they actually follow
through with it.
Yeah, Section 33. But my professor asked the class, regardless of what you think of Premier Ford's political bent or whether or not you empathize with his politics, don't you think can't you be slightly sympathetic or empathetic towards the fact that you have a democratically elected premier who's trying to introduce legislation who's getting shot down by an appointed judge?
And that brings up a lot of issues.
Yeah. This brings into question the whole issue of judicial review.
But also how powerful an elected member can be when he's elected by a majority, but there's a huge minority population that didn't vote for him.
He says in a press conference, 2.5 million people voted for me. They represent approximately like...
Reach.
Okay. So a Toronto city councillor, prior to all of this, a Toronto city councillor represented approximately 65,000 citizens of Toronto. And now it is increasing to about 110, over 100,000. And then this is funny because...
That's almost double.
There's 110,000 people is the whole province of PEI. So... But I mean, like, that's...
Which I'm sure has multiple city councillors.
Well, there's multiple cities on Prince Edward Island, don't you know?
Are there? A joke, everyone, a joke.
Just give it to the
Torontonians
task. But, I mean, like, this is symptomatic of the fact that we're becoming a more urbanized, sparsely populated country.
Sparsely populated country. Sparsely.
Say that 10 times... fast.
Sparsely.
Okay, you're getting there. But
do you like parsley?
I don't know. Sparsely.
You were saying.
And so this 60,000 to 110,000 thing was one of the critical ways that the Ontario Superior Court Justice tackled the issue of freedom of expression. But, I mean, Premier Ford said that this judge supports left-leaning organizations and he's an activist judge. And
yeah, but John, everybody knows that judges are unelected, they're appointed.
Yeah.
And we expect, in the Canadian legal system, judges are above the cuff. They don't pay attention to politics, they don't have political ideologies, they're probably not religious, and they're just supposed to be above it all.
So you're talking about the Canadian concept of the ideal judge.
Yeah, it's a huge and stark difference to our neighbors down south.
But I think we could certainly explore this whole topic in a future episode. But I'm a Doug Ford supporter.
Mm-hmm.
I voted for Doug Ford. I may have volunteered for Doug Ford. I may have donated $20 to his campaign. I am staunchly Doug Ford. Doug Ford gets elected with a majority. I'm excited. I think we're at good times ahead.
Congratulations. Jacob and I haven't voted for Doug Ford.
So
I'm
what
not
I'm
not an Ontario resident.
In our hypothetical standpoint.
Yeah.
And then September rolls around, and I'm like, okay, there's
no,
my...
but I'm serious. Jacob and I haven't voted for Doug Ford.
Right.
We're in this room. We just happen to be, this disproportionate versus how he, like, the number of people who won for him.
Sure, 38% to, 38%.
And we feel like whatever law, whether it's this law or a future law, isn't reflective of our values.
Yeah, but
does he have the right to push it through?
But
just
he
because he was
had
elected?
a majority government.
So
he's a mandate of the people. So
a first past the post system.
that is our system that we're using.
That doesn't make it the best system.
I know, but we can
But
we can get into a conversation about how Trudeau failed us another time. But isn't the point?
Bleed blue.
Isn't the
Conservative Party will strike again.
Isn't
I'm
the
kidding,
problem
everyone. Relax.
that your definition of democracy and my definition of democracy at this moment seem to be different? And you lost, I won, and now you want my cake.
No.
But that's what.
No.
That's what's
You're
going on in the background.
You're making your cake with gluten. I'm allergic to gluten. So I want the judge to sit there and tell you can't have gluten.
Yeah, but in this hypothetical situation, the people
I messed that analogy up. I want the judge to sit there and tell you.
that one.
You have
As a Vancouverite.
You have to make the cake gluten-free.
Yeah, but
make your cake, but there are restrictions. Because guess what? You don't just get to go into any building or any public office.
Yeah, but the mandate, let's say that the scope of the powers in this hypothetical fiction of government bakery, the people who get elected get to set the rules on making cakes.
But you don't get to do that at the expense of other people.
Yeah, but the Ontario Superior Court Justice is all about gluten-free cakes. Everything he ever said was about gluten-free cakes, and so now this appointed guy on your behalf is telling me how I'm going to make my cakes. So I'm going to say invoke Section 33.
That's not fair.
But I think there is a check and balance on the use of that Section 33 as well, and that is the court of public opinion. If the Canadian population, or not even the Canadian population, but the Ontario population really thinks that this is negative for the province, they will simply not re-elect Premier Doug Ford. And all of this will woozy-wazy, fugazi-fugazi, Wolf of Wall Street quote here, away. So there are checks and balances at all stages here. I think that the Notwithstanding Clause is in the Constitution. It can be used. Whether it's the right thing or not is questionable in the situation. I think the timing of it is suspect. I think proper channels could have been used. He could have waited it out a little bit longer. The counter argument there would be that, well, then efficiency is jeopardized.
But John, sorry, Jacob, not to cut you off, but John, you're getting to, I see the point you're trying to get to, and I'm bothered by it because we'll get back to you. Hold on, you're going too far. Your point and the point Premier Ford was making in the sense that this judge, has an agenda, he's interfering, he should not be allowed to do this. But we're forgetting the only reason why the judge had any opportunity to say something is because the city of Toronto, the municipality, the lawyers who work there, brought an application, said, we're not okay with this.
Right.
And that's why the system exists. Because there are a group of people, whether they voted for Ford or not, who had a problem with this piece of legislation. And it's their right in our legal system to do that. So the fact, to bring to what Jacob was saying, that he immediately mentions that he's going to circumvent this whole process. You are all beneath me. You are all peasants. This is my world now. I'm going to not withstand this issue. Something that's only been used like a handful of times in Canadian history. Most recent of which was in Alberta for something.
Saskatchewan,
sorry.
2018.
Toronto, in this country, elsewhere.
Saskatchewan in 2018 over Catholic board funding questions, which Catholic education and minority rights languages are always a huge topic out in the West. But
and
yes.
I also think education is a huge topic out in Ontario, but for a totally different reason.
I think that we also have to look at the context of what's going on in the world right now, and most notably what's going on down south. And I think that the kind of general atmosphere towards more authoritative decisions and unilateral decisions made by politicians are kind of part of like the media hysteria right now.
Regardless of how many people have voted for you.
But I mean...
No, I'm just saying that the interpretation of the use of the Notwithstanding Clause is definitely going to be blown out of proportion based on what's going on.
Well, there's certainly a populist kind of bent to some of the politics that are now happening, right?
Yeah.
Where you're just trying to appeal to the broadest amount of people, and you use that as a backing.
Yeah.
Versus, I don't know what sometimes I get confused about what non-populist is even supposed to mean, because like a democracy is a democracy.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm here to be devil's advocate, in that
That's fine.
like perhaps Ontario and Canadians sometimes get uncomfortable that there's actually multiple definitions to democracy, and it's not just who gets elected with a majority or minority or X number of votes.
So you've switched sides now.
No, I'm just saying that I think people because here's the flip argument.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of op-eds and editorials that came out that lambasted Premier Ford for his actions, and everybody was gushing about how the Notwithstanding Clause was being invoked and how he's doing this to undermine the city of Toronto and how he was being bullish and a bully.
All true.
But those were obviously from non-conservative sources.
Okay.
So don't you think, and I don't say I'm going to agree with this, but you're going to see opinions and commentaries on X and Y thread everywhere. The reason why people are getting so up in arms about this is because your team lost, and now that you lost, you're trying to tell me, like circling right back to that analogy, that how to bake my cake, and you're just trying to give me a hard time because I won and you lost.
Yeah.
But you think that's
how it works.
So what you're hinting at is that there's more to democracy than majoritarianism. There's the protection of rights. There's the rule of law.
There has to be. That's the whole reason why we have a charter. That's the whole reason why we go and we make a huge stink over the minority. Sorry, I was going to say the non-majority, but I was like, there's a word for that.
There's a word.
The minority.
Yeah.
Minority groups. That's why we, in this country, it's why we spend so much time fighting over minority language rights and, immigration status and how we treat, prisoners and all these other things. It's because regardless of who wins, we're not in a state where you're allowed to just do whatever the heck you want. And so when someone brings an application and an action to the court and asks a judge who is relatively impartial, what I was saying before with, he's above the political, like that's our ideals for our judicial system, that, our judges will be nonpartisan and they will reason on both sides. And eventually the system will work so that it balances out. And that's exactly what played out here. We had a lower court judge who had a very obvious kind of visceral reaction, a huge turnaround rate, which I will say is like kudos to him for throwing this together. But that was very quickly checked by the upper court.
Right. So now that we can evaluate in hindsight, is there not some credence to this opinion that I was stating before? Look at the 180 between the Ontario Superior Court and the Ontario Court of Appeal. The Ontario Court of Appeal basically said, no, there's no freedom of expression violation. You misapplied Section 3. Yeah, we agree that there was no Section 15 violation.
Yeah.
It's unfair, but it's not unconstitutional.
Yeah, it's unfair, but it's not unconstitutional.
So the whole process was a waste of time?
Your opinion, sorry, Ontario Superior Court Judge, you were wrong.
Okay.
And what Doug Ford originally said in that press conference on September 10th was going after how this Ontario Superior Court judge had an obvious bent. And now you see the Ontario Court of Appeal come out in 180 the decision. I mean, isn't there some validation to what Premier Ford said about, we were told by a judge who clearly has an obvious angle? Because look at what the Ontario Court of Appeal said. Isn't there not some validation to this idea of activist judges interfering in the legislature?
What's wrong with having an activist judge if, in your scenario, in your context, what's wrong with that if the next level above him found the equilibrium.
I don't really know I don't know what the right answer to that is.
Because let's say he was a judge with the completely polar opposite other end of the spectrum opinion.
You'd have had no invocation of the notwithstanding, and you would have no
it would
appeal
have gone
process.
up to a higher court.
So you think that the city of Toronto would have appealed? So instead of Premier Ford's camp appealing, it would have been the city of Toronto appealing.
Exactly.
But you wouldn't have had invocation of the Section 33 right?
I mean, I don't know. Would he have mentioned it if the city of Toronto had appealed it to the higher court? So we're living in a hypothetical world where the trial court has decided in favor of Doug Ford, Rob Ford, Premier Ford, whatever his name is. Whatever titles we're going by today.
I mean,
we're
Doug Ford.
Whatever. Literally whatever. So we're going in a hypothetical world where the trial court level comes back, agrees with him. The city of Toronto says, no, we're still going to appeal this. We go to a higher level court. Let's say they come to the exact same decision. Yeah. The court has done its job.
So you think that the
system has worked.
So you think that using the Section 33 language is to some extent immature or premature because we're undermining the role of the judiciary?
Yes.
So it should only be used if it's to bypass the higher level court. So
I don't think I totally agree with that. So I don't have a fundamental issue with the use of Section 33.
Right.
I think that there are absolutely situations that could arise in the future where it probably would be appropriate, where a government would overrule a judicial decision for whether it's, times of war, et cetera, okay? There is a situation where the Notwithstanding Clause can be used. What I got stuck on is that it was one of his being Premier Ford's first instinctual reactions to a court or anyone quote unquote getting in his way. And I think that maybe, it's less legally inclined of an opinion, but it speaks more to his view on government, his view on power, and how he plans on exercising that.
Well, because he did say that in the future that his government is prepared to invoke Section 33 again.
Yeah.
Which I think.
So he's literally threatened to use it against.
There's 3 tiers. The first tier is the fact that he's using it in the context of the city of Toronto. Yeah. Then there's the second fact. The second tier is that he's using it at all. And then instead of waiting for the appeal process to go, and then the third thing, which I think was where a lot of legal commentators were very focusing on their attention. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the most discussion should have been having instead of the previous 2, where we got bogged down in perhaps some political opinions. Yeah. Is the fact that he's ready to use it again, which I think is fairly novel, because you're not just talking about a one-off use, you're talking about a repeated, sustained use of Section 33
a disregard
for your legislative plan.
Which speaks to a disregard for the checks and balances in the system that's been created in order to make sure that legislation is not necessarily fair, because as the Ontario Court of Appeal pointed out, it doesn't necessarily have to be fair, but that does not infringe on charter rights.
I think 2 things. In direct response to that, I think that at the end of the day...
Woo, we're at the end of the day?
Man, we sure are close. At the end of the day, as we were saying earlier, public opinion will be the check and balance on the use of that Section 33.
So the Fifth Estate.
Ooh, on the use of the Section 33. Okay.
Because then once Premier Doug Ford uses it, or uses it again in the future, and then again and again, if the electorate is disenchanted with his use of Section 33, he will not be put into that same position of power, and he will be replaced by a person from likely a different political party, and they will just overturn everything anyways. So at the end of the day, you'll just have 4-year increments of these decisions. And public opinion, the Section 33 is in the charter for a reason. Yeah. We've talked extensively about whether it's appropriate in this situation or not, but
It was put there to be used.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a
So
compromise.
there's the initial check and balance that the courts play on the passing of legislation. There is then the check and balance on the courts in the form of Section 33. But the final check and balance in any democracy is the will of the people, ideally. Obviously.
Whoa, drop one of Clue's bombs.
You know what I'm saying? Now, going back a little bit earlier to what Cerise was hinting at or touching on, scraping on, you know, yeah, we were talking about whether it was appropriate for Premier Ford to turn to Section 33 almost instinctually. That was almost his first response, without even letting it go up the court system.
Well, he did say at the press conference, we are my lawyers are appealing it, and we are prepared to use.
Okay, yeah.
And then he said later on, and we were prepared to use it again in the future.
But just looking at again,
but he did say it like in the same
instance, shortly after the uproar.
Everybody focused on what came after that. We're gonna go to
now. Looking at, you have to also look at the events surrounding the whole thing. And right around the time that he actually threatened to use the Notwithstanding Clause, he also wanted to change the Queen's Park rules of the Ontario legislature. Now, the Queen's Park rules are the legislative procedure rules for the Ontario legislature, and he actually wanted to change them so that his party, the PCs, could pass bills without as much opposition. Now, I'm not sure about the exact intricacies and nuances of how it is that the rules would be restructured or whatever, but this was also introduced. So if you look at it in context, this does start to bring in the issue of character into question.
So you think he's initiating some kind of new paradigm where he's trying to change the rules so that it favors...
Exactly. No, I'm not saying that's exactly what's happening, but I'm saying exactly in the sense that that's how it can be interpreted if you look at the entire context of the situation. If the argument for changing the city council size by half is efficiency, but then also changing the rules by which you can put that bill in place as efficiency, then it starts to seem a little bit authoritarian.
But
it does.
Isn't that what majority rules? Like, if the majority is allowed to do it.
Exactly, and then public opinion comes in and says, not today. Or they allow it. Now, the bigger issue there then is kind of like a whole other Pandora's box that we probably shouldn't open up, but it becomes the whole education issue. And education about the intricacies of this legal system. I mean, we're all in law school and we're having so much difficulty wrapping our heads around all the different loose ends and concepts here. But then if people are up in arms over the use of the Notwithstanding Clause, but they don't actually understand the purpose that it plays within the Constitution. Or on the other side, people are all for it because they want to see things get done.
So then how does the court of public opinion grapple with the intricacies and this very, like...
Because they see you are grappling with the issue, and they go, now, all I see is an appointed judge telling my camp what they can and cannot do, but my camp had a majority mandate.
Do people even care that judges are appointed and not elected? I don't think most people walk around.
I don't think
thinking,
people know about judges or care until they enter like there's an issue about it, and then people have
opinions, and concerns.
And
right?
to be honest, I don't think a lot of people want. I don't think people want to care about the judges or any of that. Like politics is politics is the focus, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not until the judicial system
people who are raising their taxes and are spending their money and building them roads and bringing them jobs. And when you see
and judges don't
do any of that,
really.
In fact, they just sit there quietly and think about all these arguments we put before them, right? Like fundamentally, like that's their role in society. And so I get what you're saying, John, in the sense of like us as legal insiders, and that's what you're called the moment you enter into law school and you get access to this world where we have a slightly more informed idea of how all these institutions work, whether it's,
emphasis on slightly.
A little, just a little bit.
Exactly. But we become really privy to these like subcontexts and different ideas. The vast majority of people, I think you're so correct in saying, see a guy who sits like with a gravel in his hand and told the person that they elected, no, you can't do that. And what authority do you really have to to say that. To the average person, you should have none, right? But to the person who didn't vote for Doug Ford, they're probably thrilled.
They're probably thrilled.
Oh, we have another chance.
Who are these wizards in robes that are stopping this horrible man?
Exactly. Right? And so sometimes I think Canadians need to start asking questions about what exactly democracy means, and we should be more engaged in this idea of and the courts have talked about this, Supreme Court has talked about this a lot in charter issues, that there's more to democracy than majoritarianism. But I think that people only have those conversations when somebody's won and lost, and I think there needs to be more conversation about what democracy looks like in Canada outside of election season and outside of these political contests.
You know what? I would also add to that, and I agree that, conversation has to be had of, like we've had, like we touched on it very slightly, like this first past the post kind of like conversations and disappointments we've experienced across the country. But it also comes within the legal community when we talk about and we criticize judges and we talk about judicial courage. And there was a lot of criticism against this lower court judge for misapplying the rule and being too partisan, or and he was directly attacked by a politician, which doesn't usually happen in Canada, for a decision that he came to when internally at a trial level.
That's pure court,
right? Which is the lowest level of court you can ever go to, unless you're going to traffic court. That's different. But we also have to have conversations and think about what it takes to be judicially courageous, what it takes to, as like Jacob was talking earlier, reinterpret sections of the charter and our laws and expand them so that they're more reflective of what's going on in our real lives now.
So I agree.
You do?
Yeah, I mean, because everything, oftentimes, to quote my criminal procedure instructor again, the only time that you get development of charter issues are with criminals. So there's like something to be said about law. Some of the best law gets created out of people being wrong, about messed up situations, but like all these kinds of things.
Big old process of trial.
But I wanted to close off this conversation with a bet. A gamble.
Ooh.
Do you think we'll see, I don't know, next 10, next 15 years, somebody come back to and revisit Section 3 differently? Do you think that could gain more traction out of what happened here? Or do you think that Hague is gonna be good, is gonna be a good decision?
Good law. On Westlaw, it's gonna be in the green.
Till we're all old and gray.
I don't know. I think you brought up some really interesting points where huge parts of the Canadian population are in urban centers, but that, Hague in Section 3 fundamentally protects this notion of provincial versus federal power, and municipalities have always ever been like minor offices, off the main corridor of, the building. Yep. Right? That's a bad analogy.
So what do you think?
What's the bet? Will you pay my tuition if I'm right?
Yo, I'll take you out for a Timmy's. Are we allowed to still say Timmy's? Are they still in good favor?
No, because they're not.
Okay, so I don't know. I'll go buy you some fair trade coffee or something.
Can't turn that down.
He's from Vancouver, so he really can't.
I can't turn it down.
5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Never.
I think all aspects of the charter will be revisited at some point, so I think it's a safe bet, especially seeing how we are becoming increasingly urbanized. Is that
urbanized.
Our populations are increasingly concentrating in the urban centers of the country. I think that it's a pretty safe bet. That being said, federalism does reign pretty supreme and is of great importance to the fabric of what Canada is. So it's difficult. I think it'll be revisited. I'm not sure what the outcome will be. Gotta give me a year. Okay, we can do prices right. Under or over?
Under over 5 years?
Let's say under over 15. Because we would be
under. Over. The way things are snapping.
Peter Hogg won't let that go down. Peter Hogg will be in that. He'd be like, oh no, I did not spend all these years writing all these textbooks for you.
You should just change up the charter. No.
So I hope under, because I think this conversation should be had.
So interesting. I'm hoping for it, but I don't think it will.
Yeah, I also think it will be over. So listeners, take that down.
Call us at 613-613-3333. Let us know your thoughts. Cast your vote. Dial 9 for
Keep us
under.
accountable. Keep us accountable. Yax is the only one under 15 years that we're going to revisit Section 3. C and I are at the
Can't wait
older-
to get that free trade coffee in 2029.
But let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to episode 1.
We are the Inter-Veners.
Can we just talk about Kanye today? We don't need to talk about any of this Doug Ford stuff. What do we think about my man on SNL with the MAGA hat?